They took my parking spot for almost 2 years, and for a long time I told myself it wasn't worth a fight. It was just a parking space, right? A rectangle of concrete with faded white lines and the number 214 stenciled near the curb. But here's the thing about small things. When someone takes them from you slowly, confidently, like they're entitled to it, it stops being small. I lived in that apartment complex for 6 years. Nothing fancy. Brick exterior, mid-80s construction, the kind of place with slightly outdated balconies and a pool nobody really used after Labor Day. It was called Maple Crest Residences, though there wasn't a maple tree in sight. I rented Unit 3B. Underground garage. Assigned parking. Space 214. It was written clearly in my lease, bold and boring and official. I'm not a dramatic guy. I work in IT support for a regional hospital, mostly remote, mostly quiet. My car's nothing special either. A dark blue Honda Accord with a cracked rear reflector and a stubborn rattle in the dashboard. But that parking space mattered. It meant I didn't have to circle at night. It meant I didn't have to worry about street sweeping tickets or break-ins. It meant predictability. One Monday morning, I pulled into the garage before work and there it was, a black Range Rover, spotless, sitting dead center in 214. Not crooked, not apologetic, just settled, like it had always belonged there. I remember just sitting in my car for a minute, engine idling, staring at it. I thought maybe someone messed up, maybe a guest, maybe a one-time thing. I drove around the garage twice, slow and hopeful, but every other space was either marked or taken. Guest parking was full, so I backed out, drove 3 blocks down to Oak Street, and parallel parked between a dented pickup and a rusted Corolla. On my way back, I wrote a note. I kept it polite. Hi. This space is assigned to Unit 3B. Please use guest parking. Thanks. No sarcasm. No attitude. Just facts. The next morning, the Range Rover was still there. My note was gone. That was the moment something shifted in me. Not anger exactly. More like disbelief. Like when someone cuts in line at a coffee shop and doesn't even pretend they didn't see you. I went to the leasing office that afternoon. The property manager, Diane Porter, had been there as long as I'd lived in the building. Early 50s, sharp haircut, always carried a clipboard like it was an extension of her arm. She pulled up my lease, clicked around the parking registry on her computer, and frowned slightly. That's odd, she said. Space 214 is listed under the penthouse unit. I blinked. I've parked there for 6 years. She gave me a tight smile. The penthouse tenant pays for 2 premium spaces. They have priority. I pointed at the screen. It's in my lease. 214. She scrolled again, slower this time. Her lips pressed together. Looks like there may have been a clerical error when records were transferred during the management change a few years back. So what does that mean? It means we'll reassign you to another spot. I don't want another spot, I said, keeping my voice even. I want the one in my lease. She tapped her pen against the desk. I'll look into it. She never did. The Range Rover stayed. I parked on Oak Street, then Maple Avenue, then wherever I could find space. Within a week, I got 2 tickets because I misjudged street sweeping days. One night, someone sideswiped my car and left a white scrape across the passenger door. No note. No witnesses. When I went back to Diane, she offered me a temporary solution, a narrow spot at the far end of the garage near the trash compactor. Dim lighting. Tight clearance. Half a mile from the elevator, or at least it felt that way after a 12-hour shift. It's the best I can do, she said. I asked who the penthouse tenant was. I can't disclose resident information, she replied, her voice smooth as glass. But people always leave clues. A few days later, I noticed the mailbox on the penthouse row downstairs. Silver nameplate. Nolan Pierce. I Googled him that night. Turns out Nolan Pierce owned 3 luxury auto dealerships across the metro area. Pierce European Motors, Pierce Imports, and something called Apex Performance Gallery. High-end stuff. Ferraris. Bentleys. Flashy branding. Billboards with his smile and the slogan, Elevate Your Drive. He looked exactly like you'd expect. Tailored suits, salt and pepper hair, confident grin that said he'd never been told no in his life. And suddenly it all made sense. To him, that space probably wasn't theft. It was correction. A minor inconvenience corrected by someone important enough to do it. I thought about being petty. I really did. I imagined letting the air out of his tires, filing noise complaints, leaving notes that weren't polite. But that's not who I am. And more importantly, that wouldn't solve anything. What kept bothering me wasn't just the parking. It was the way the system bent around him. The way Diane stopped returning my emails. The way other tenants shrugged when I mentioned it, like challenging a guy in the penthouse was just not practical. One evening, while walking back from Oak Street in the rain, I started thinking about something Diane had said. Records were transferred during management change. Maple Crest was originally built as apartments in the mid-'80s, but about 15 years ago it went through a partial condo conversion before reverting back to rentals. I remembered reading that in some old HOA newsletter taped in the lobby, and something clicked. If there had been a condo phase, then some assets might have been sold separately. I took a half-day off work and drove to the county assessor's office downtown. It felt dramatic at the time, like I was overreacting to a rectangle of concrete, but I couldn't let it go. I spent 3 hours pulling property records, flipping through scanned documents from the early 2000s. Most of it was boring legal language. Then I found something interesting. Several parking spaces, not all, just a handful, had been sold as individual units during the condo conversion. They weren't owned by the building. They were owned by a third-party LLC and leased back to management. And guess which space was on that list? My heart actually sped up a little when I saw it, because that meant something important. It meant Maple Crest didn't own my spot. And if they didn't own it, then neither did Nolan Pierce. That night, I wrote down the LLC's name on a sticky note and stared at it for a long time, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. The LLC had a generic name, something forgettable like North Harbor Holdings, the kind of name designed to disappear in paperwork. No website, no social media, just an address listed in another state and a registered agent. Most people would have stopped there. I almost did. I mean, what was I really doing? Taking time off work, digging through property archives over a parking space? If I told my coworkers, they would have laughed and told me to just move. But it wasn't about moving anymore. It was about being quietly erased. So I kept going. I called the registered agent first, straight to voicemail. I left a message, short and simple, said I was inquiring about purchasing a specific parking unit tied to Maple Crest residences. I didn't expect a call back. 2 days later, I got one. The man on the other end sounded confused more than anything. His name was Leonard Whitaker. Late 70s, maybe early 80s. Retired. He told me he'd invested in a batch of parking spaces during the condo conversion years ago because his brother-in-law convinced him it was passive income. He said he honestly hadn't thought about them in over a decade. I still own those, he asked, half laughing. Yes, sir, I said. At least according to the county records. There was a long pause. I could hear a television in the background. Well, I'll be damned. I explained the situation carefully. I didn't mention Nolan's name at first. I just said I was a tenant who had been assigned the space for years, and I recently discovered the building didn't actually own it. Leonard sighed. They leased them from me. Cheap too. I never bothered raising the rate. Would you consider selling one? I asked. Another pause. You serious? I am. He asked why, and that was the moment I had to decide how honest to be. Because someone's using it who shouldn't be, I said. And no one's fixing it. He chuckled softly. Sounds like a story there. There is. We talked for almost 40 minutes. About real estate. About how condo conversions were messy. About how parking spaces in urban areas had become surprisingly valuable. He admitted he didn't want to manage tiny assets across state lines anymore. I'll sell it, he finally said. 18,000. My stomach dropped. I'd expected maybe 10, 12. 18 was real money. For a parking space. I'd need a week, I said carefully. Fair enough. That week was intense. I ran numbers obsessively. I had some savings, but not enough. I applied for a personal loan through my credit union. I told them it was for real estate acquisition, which was technically true. I barely slept those nights. Part of me kept whispering that this was insane, that I was about to take on debt over pride. But another part, the part that remembered the white scrape on my door, the dismissive look on Diane's face, told me this wasn't pride. It was principle. The loan got approved. I wired the funds. A week later, I signed digital documents transferring ownership of parking unit 214 into my name. I remember opening the final email attachment, the recorded deed, and just staring at it on my laptop. My name, black and white, legal owner. For the first time in months, I smiled in that garage. I didn't confront Nolan right away. I wanted to time it right. That Friday afternoon, I waited until I saw him in person. He was getting out of the Range Rover, talking on his phone, sunglasses on even though we were underground. I walked up calmly. "Excuse me," I said. He looked at me the way people look at someone asking for directions. "Yeah, you've been parking in 214. He frowned slightly. "That's one of mine." "Not anymore." He gave a small, amused exhale. "Look, if this is about the assignment mix-up, talk to management." I did. And now I own it." He actually laughed. A full, open laugh. "You own what?" 214. He shook his head like I'd just told him I owned the moon. "Okay, I'll email you the deed." That made him pause. Just a flicker. "Email me," he said, still smiling. I didn't have his email, of course. But business owners like him aren't hard to reach. I called his dealership, asked for his assistant, and said it was regarding a property matter. 10 minutes later, I had it. I sent the deed. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. His tone was different now. Not hostile, just measured. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "County records," I said. "It's legitimate." Silence. "What do you want?" There it was. The assumption that this was a shakedown. "I want you to stop parking there," I said. That's it. That's it." He exhaled slowly. "I'll buy it from you." 20,000. No. 25. No. A beat. "Why?" "Because for 2 years, you acted like I didn't exist," I wanted to say. "Because you thought rules were suggestions." Instead, I said, "I'm not interested in selling." "You live here, right? You need the spot." "Not necessarily." Another pause, longer this time. "You're making this personal." "It's already personal." He didn't respond to that. By Monday, the Range Rover was gone from 214. And for a brief moment, I thought that was the end of it. I could have just parked there again and enjoyed the quiet victory. But here's the part that changed everything. That Sunday night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the deed again. I thought about how he'd offered 25,000 without blinking. That told me something. The space wasn't just convenient for him. It was strategic. Space 214 was directly across from the elevator. Prime visibility. Anyone coming down from the residential floors walked past it. And Nolan Pierce didn't just sell cars. He sold image. That's when I remembered something else. His biggest competitor in town was a dealership called Redline Motor Group, owned by a guy named Carlos Mendez. Their rivalry was well known in local business circles. Competing billboards, competing radio ads, subtle digs and interviews. And their flagship showroom was less than 3 miles from Pierce European Motors. I did a little research. Found out Redline had just launched a new high-performance electric model they were heavily promoting. An idea formed. Not petty, not destructive, just strategic. I called Redline the next morning and asked to speak to a manager about a unique advertising opportunity. They called back within the hour. The guy who called me back introduced himself as Daniel Reyes, operations director at Redline Motor Group. His voice was sharp, curious, the kind of tone you hear from someone who's always calculating angles. "You mentioned advertising space," he said. "Not exactly a billboard," I replied. "More targeted." I explained where I lived. I didn't mention Nolan by name at first. I just described the layout: underground garage, single elevator access point, prime parking spot directly in front of it. High visibility, daily foot traffic from residents, guests, delivery drivers. "And you own this spot?" Daniel asked. "I do." "What's the angle?" That's when I told him who lived in the penthouse. There was a short pause on the line, then a low whistle. "You're serious?" "Very." "And you're offering what exactly?" "A lease. 3 years. Exclusive use of the space. You park one of your branded vehicles there. Perfectly legal. Private property." He didn't laugh. He didn't question my sanity. He just asked, "What's your number?" I hadn't planned that far. I almost said something conservative. Instead, I thought about the loan I'd just taken out. I thought about the white scrape on my door. I thought about 25,000 said like pocket change. 800 a month, I said. He didn't hesitate. "Done." That surprised me more than anything. We drafted a simple lease agreement. Nothing fancy. Exclusive parking rights for Unit 214, renewable after 3 years. They would supply a branded vehicle, maintain insurance, handle any liability issues. I retained ownership. The following Friday, a bright red electric coupe rolled into Maple Crest's underground garage. Sleek, aggressive lines. Redline logo wrapped across both doors in bold white lettering. It looked like it belonged on a showroom floor, not between a beige Camry and a minivan with a soccer sticker. Daniel himself drove it in. "You sure about this?" he asked, stepping out, glancing around the garage. Completely. He backed it carefully into 214, straightened it, then adjusted slightly so the logo faced the elevator perfectly. We both stood there for a second, admiring the view. It was almost cinematic. Industrial lighting reflecting off polished red paint. White logo catching the eye the second elevator doors opened. Petty? Daniel asked lightly. Strategic, I corrected. By Monday morning, the entire building had seen it. You could tell from the way people slowed when they stepped out of the elevator. A few even took pictures. Someone in the tenant Facebook group posted, "Since when does Redline live here?" Nolan noticed too. I was checking my mail that evening when he walked in. No sunglasses this time. No phone. Just him. He stopped when he saw me. What is that? He asked flatly. A car, I said. You know what I mean. It's parked in 214. His jaw tightened. You leased it? Yes. To them? Yes. There was something almost impressive about how fast he recalculated. Anger flickered, but it was contained. Controlled. You're using my address to advertise for my competitor. I'm using my property. This is harassment. No, I said calmly. It's business. He stepped closer. Not threatening. Just intense. I'll give you $40,000. The number hung there between us. $40,000 would have wiped out my loan and left me with profit. For a second, just a second, I felt the pull of it. But then I pictured that first Monday morning. The note gone. The shrug from management. The tickets. The scrape. No, I said. His eyes hardened slightly. 50. I shook my head. You're making an enemy you don't want, he said quietly. You already made one, I replied. For the next few weeks, things escalated in small, controlled ways. Twice, a tow truck showed up, called in by someone claiming unauthorized commercial parking. Both times, the driver called the number listed on file, mine. Both times, I confirmed the vehicle was legally parked on private property. The HOA sent me a letter asking about commercial use concerns. I sent back a copy of the deed and lease agreement. Their attorney responded with a single line, no violation found. Nolan stopped acknowledging me after that. But the car stayed. Every morning, residents exiting the elevator were greeted by a gleaming red Redline coupe. Some asked questions. Some Googled. A couple of them even mentioned test driving one. Was it actually costing Nolan business? I don't know. Maybe not directly. But it disrupted something. It poked at the image he curated so carefully. And here's the truth I didn't expect to confront. At first, I told myself this was about justice. About fairness. About correcting a power imbalance. But somewhere along the way, it became about something else. Control. For 2 years, I felt small in that garage. Invisible. Replaceable. Buying that space flipped the script. Leasing it turned the volume up. One night, I was sitting on my balcony, looking down at the city lights, and I asked myself a question I hadn't wanted to consider. Had I gone too far? Because technically, he'd stopped parking there once I proved ownership. I could have ended it there. Quiet victory. Lesson learned. Instead, I chose escalation. I justified it by saying he needed to feel what it was like to lose something strategic. To be inconvenienced. To have his environment subtly altered without consent. But if I'm being honest, there was satisfaction in it. Real satisfaction. The lease payments started coming in like clockwork. $800 a month. The loan shrank. My savings rebuilt. Financially, it was the smartest move I'd made in years. And every time I walked past 214 and saw that red logo gleaming under fluorescent lights, I felt a small, steady pulse of vindication. Nolan eventually made one final offer. We ran into each other by the elevators about 6 months in. $60,000, he said without preamble. That number hit differently. $60,000 for a parking space I'd bought for 18. I looked at him carefully. You really hate that car, I said. He didn't smile. Name your price. I thought about it. Not emotionally. Logically. If I sold, Redline would relocate the vehicle. The garage would go back to neutral. Nolan would restore his visual territory. I'd walk away with profit and a story. But something in me resisted the idea of giving him what he wanted just because he finally offered enough. It's under contract, I said. 3 years. You can break it. Not for sale. For the first time since this started, he looked tired. Not angry. Not arrogant. Just tired. This is ridiculous, he muttered. Yeah, I said softly. It kind of is. He walked away after that. We still live in the same building. We still use the same elevator. The red car is still there. Sometimes I catch myself wondering what would have happened if I'd just accepted 25,000 at the start. Or 40. Or 60. Would that have been smarter? More mature? Maybe. But here's what I know. That parking space taught me something I didn't expect to learn in my 30s. That ownership changes power. That quiet people can still draw hard lines. That systems don't always correct themselves unless someone pushes back. Was I justified? Or did I let pride steer the wheel longer than it should have? I'm genuinely curious what you think. If you were in my position, would you have sold it? Taken the money and moved on? Or would you have done exactly what I did? Hold the line and make a point? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read more than you think. And if you enjoy stories about small battles that turn into something bigger, hit like, subscribe, and stick around. Because sometimes the smallest spaces carry the biggest lessons.